The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across Marcus Chen's face as he sat alone at his usual corner table in Luminaire, the city's most exclusive restaurant. At 42, he had everything money could buy: a penthouse overlooking Central Park, a fleet of luxury cars, and a tech empire worth billions. Yet tonight, like every other night for the past 3 years, he dined alone. Marcus had built TechVision from nothing, pouring every ounce of his energy into creating something that mattered. But somewhere along the way, he'd lost everything else. His wife had left him, taking their daughter Emma to the West Coast. His parents had passed away within months of each other. The executives at his company feared him more than they respected him, and the so-called friends who surrounded him at charity galas disappeared the moment the champagne ran dry. He mechanically cut into his Wagyu steak, barely tasting the expensive meat. The waiter approached with practiced deference, refilling his wine glass without being asked. Marcus nodded absently, his mind already wandering to the quarterly reports waiting on his desk. Numbers never disappointed him, numbers made sense. That's when he noticed them through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows. A family huddled together on the sidewalk outside, their breath visible in the November cold. A man, probably in his mid-30s, wrapped his arms around a woman and a small child, trying to shield them from the biting wind. They weren't asking for money or holding signs. They were simply trying to stay warm, pressed against the building's brick wall. Marcus watched as the father removed his own thin jacket and wrapped it around the little girl, who couldn't have been more than 7 years old. The same age Emma had been when he'd last held her. Something twisted in his chest, an unfamiliar sensation he hadn't felt in years. Without thinking, Marcus raised his hand to call the waiter. "Yes, Mr. Chen." The waiter appeared instantly. "Do you see that family outside?" Marcus gestured toward the window. "Yes, sir. I apologize. I'll have security move them along immediately." "No," Marcus interrupted sharply. Then, softening his tone, "I want you to bring them inside. Seat them at a table and bring them whatever they want to eat. The best you have." The waiter's eyebrows rose slightly, but years of professional training kept his expression neutral. "Of course, sir. Right away." Marcus turned back to his meal, telling himself it was just a charitable gesture, nothing more. Tax deductible. Good PR if word got out. But he couldn't stop his eyes from drifting to the entrance as the waiter appeared outside, speaking to the family. At first, they looked terrified, shaking their heads vigorously. The father positioned himself protectively in front of his wife and daughter. But the waiter persisted, gesturing inside, and finally, the woman whispered something to her husband. The little girl looked up at her parents with wide, hopeful eyes. Slowly, hesitantly, they followed the waiter inside. Marcus watched as they were seated at a table across the dining room. Other patrons turned to stare, their faces reflecting varying degrees of curiosity, disgust, and discomfort. The family's clothes were worn and dirty, their faces smudged with grime. They looked utterly out of place among the silk dresses and tailored suits. The little girl clutched a tattered stuffed rabbit, its fur matted and one ear missing. She gazed around the restaurant with wonder, as if she'd stepped into a fairy tale. Marcus signaled the waiter again. "Bring them the full-course meal. Start with the lobster bisque, then the house salad, the prime rib for the adults and the chicken tenders for the child if she prefers. And bring them the chocolate soufflé for dessert, all of it. Very generous, sir." The waiter bowed slightly and departed. For the next hour, Marcus pretended to focus on his own meal while covertly watching the family. The way the mother's hands trembled as she lifted her spoon. The father's tears as he tasted the first real meal they'd probably had in weeks. The little girl's delighted laughter when the chocolate soufflé arrived, her eyes lighting up like Christmas morning. Something was breaking inside Marcus, some wall he'd spent years constructing, brick by careful brick. He remembered Emma's laughter, the way she used to climb into his lap and demand bedtime stories. When had he stopped reading to her? When had the board meetings become more important than her school plays? As the family finished their meal, Marcus watched the father speak earnestly with the waiter, probably thanking him profusely. The mother was crying softly into her napkin. The little girl had eaten every bite of her chicken tenders and was carefully wrapping the remaining half of her soufflé in a napkin. For tomorrow, he heard her whisper to her mother, her voice carrying across the quiet restaurant. "So we have something special." Marcus's vision blurred unexpectedly. When was the last time he'd cried? At his father's funeral, at his divorce hearing. The family stood to leave, the father gripping the waiter's hand one final time. As they walked toward the exit, the little girl suddenly broke away from her parents and ran directly toward Marcus's table. "Sweetheart, no," her mother called out, mortified, but the child was already standing beside Marcus, looking up at him with enormous brown eyes. "Are you the man who gave us dinner?" she asked simply. Marcus found his voice had deserted him. He managed a nod. The little girl's face broke into the most beautiful smile he'd ever seen. "Thank you," she said solemnly. "You're like an angel. My daddy says angels help people when they need it most." Before Marcus could respond, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something small, placing it carefully on the white tablecloth. Then she ran back to her parents, who were apologizing profusely to the waiter. Marcus looked down at the object on his table, and his world stopped. It was a small origami crane, folded from what looked like it had once been a colorful candy wrapper. The folds were careful and precise, the kind that came from practice and patience. But it was what was written on it, in careful child's handwriting, that made Marcus's heart crack wide open. "Don't be sad, you matter too." His hand shook as he picked up the paper crane. How had this child, who had nothing, seen something in him that he'd hidden from the entire world? How had she known that behind the expensive suits in the corner office, there was a man drowning in loneliness? Marcus looked up, but the family was already gone, disappeared into the November night. He sat frozen, the tiny crane cradled in his palm, as years of suppressed emotion finally broke through. The other diners politely looked away as tears streamed down his face, this powerful CEO reduced to sobbing in his expensive restaurant by the kindness of a homeless child. "Sir," the waiter approached cautiously, "is everything all right?" "No," Marcus said honestly, wiping his eyes. "But maybe it will be. That family, did they tell you their names? Where they're staying?" The father mentioned they've been at the Riverside shelter for the past month. "His name is David Winters. He lost his job as a teacher when his school closed, and they lost their apartment. He's been looking for work, but," the waiter trailed off sympathetically. Marcus stood abruptly, throwing down his credit card. "Charge everything to this. I need to go." "Sir, your dessert." "I don't want dessert," Marcus said. "I want to do something that actually matters." He rushed out of the restaurant into the cold night, the origami crane still clutched in his hand. The Riverside shelter was on the other side of town, and traffic was terrible, but Marcus didn't care. He hailed a cab and spent the entire ride on his phone, making calls that would have seemed insane to him just hours earlier. When he arrived at the shelter, it was nearly closing time for visitors. The woman at the front desk looked skeptical when this well-dressed stranger demanded to see the Winters family. "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't just let anyone." "Please," Marcus interrupted, and something in his voice made her pause. "They were at Luminaire tonight. I bought them dinner. The little girl, she gave me something, and I need to speak with them. Please." The woman studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Wait here." 5 minutes later, David Winters appeared, confusion and worry etched on his face. "Is something wrong? Did my daughter do something inappropriate? I'm so sorry if..." "No," Marcus said quickly. "No, please, I came because..." He stopped, suddenly unsure what to say. What had he come to do? What could he possibly offer these people that wouldn't sound like pity? He looked at the origami crane still in his hand, and the words came. "Your daughter gave me this tonight, and she wrote something on it that made me realize I've been living wrong. I've spent years building an empire, but I forgot to build a life. I forgot what actually matters." Marcus met David's eyes. "You have something I lost. A family, love, purpose beyond profit margins. And tonight, your daughter reminded me that kindness and compassion matter more than any quarterly report." David's eyes filled with tears. "We don't have anything. We lost everything." "No," Marcus said firmly. "You have each other. That's everything." He took a deep breath. "I want to help, if you'll let me. Not out of pity, but because I need you to help me too. I need to remember how to be human again." Over the next hour, sitting in the shelter's sparse common room, Marcus learned David's story. He'd been a high school art teacher, beloved by his students, until budget cuts closed his school. Medical bills from his wife Sarah's cancer treatment 2 years ago had drained their savings. They'd fallen behind on rent, and despite David's desperate job search, they'd ended up on the streets with their daughter Lily. "I taught kids to dream," David said quietly. "To believe they could create something beautiful from nothing. And now look at me. I can't even give my own daughter a roof over her head." "You taught your daughter something more valuable," Marcus said. You taught her compassion, generosity, hope. She has nothing, but she gave me that crane and told me I mattered. Do you have any idea what a gift that is? Sarah Winters had joined them, Lily asleep on her lap, the tattered rabbit tucked under the child's chin. Lily makes those cranes from anything she can find, Sarah said softly. Candy wrappers, newspaper, receipts people throw away. She says everyone deserves something beautiful, even if it's small. Marcus felt that crack in his heart widen further. I own a technology company, he said. But I also sit on the board of several schools in the district. One of them, Riverside Academy, has been looking for a new art teacher since September. He looked at David. The position includes full benefits and housing assistance. If you're interested, I can make some calls tomorrow. David stared at him, his mouth opening and closing. You can't, why would you? Because your daughter reminded me what I've been missing. Because I have the power to help, and I've been wasting it on acquisitions and investments instead of people. Marcus's voice grew stronger. Because 3 years ago, I lost my own daughter. Not to death, but to my own ambition and neglect. And tonight, a little girl who has every reason to be bitter and angry showed me more grace than I've shown anyone in years. Sarah was crying openly now. David couldn't speak at all. There's more, Marcus continued. TechVision has a program for employee dependents, full college scholarships. If you work for our partner schools, Lily would qualify. He paused. I can't give you back what you lost. But I can help you build something new. If you'll let me. It took several minutes for the Winters family to collect themselves enough to respond. When they did, it was David who spoke, his voice hoarse with emotion. Why are you really doing this? Marcus looked down at the origami crane, running his finger along its careful folds. Because I've been alone for so long that I forgot what it felt like to connect with someone. Because I need to believe there's more to life than board meetings and profit margins. Because your daughter saw me, really saw me, and showed me kindness anyway. He met David's eyes. I'm not trying to save you. I'm hoping you might help save me. That night, Marcus paid for the Winters family to stay in a hotel. Over the next weeks, he pulled strings and cashed in favors he'd been hoarding for years. David got the position at Riverside Academy and proved to be everything the students needed, someone who believed in the transformative power of art and creativity. Sarah found work as a hospital administrator, using her experience navigating the healthcare system to help other families avoid the pitfalls that had devastated them. But the biggest changes happened in Marcus himself. He started leaving work at reasonable hours. He volunteered at the shelter where he'd found the Winters family, using his business expertise to help others get back on their feet. He donated millions to arts programs in public schools. And once a week, without fail, he had dinner with David, Sarah, and Lily. Lily taught him how to make origami cranes, and he turned out to be terrible at it. His cranes were lopsided and clumsy, but Lily declared them perfect anyway. They don't have to be pretty to be special, she told him seriously. They just have to be made with love. 6 months after that November night, Marcus finally gathered the courage to call his ex-wife. I know I don't deserve a second chance, he told her. I know I failed you and Emma. But I'm different now, or maybe I'm finally becoming who I was supposed to be all along. I'm not asking you to take me back. I'm just asking if Emma might want to see her father again. The father I should have been from the beginning. His ex-wife was silent for a long moment. What changed? She finally asked. Marcus looked at the origami crane he kept on his desk, its colors faded but its message still clear. A little girl who had nothing gave me everything, he said simply. Emma agreed to visit, tentatively at first. She was 10 now, wary and guarded. But Marcus was patient. He asked about her life, her interests, her dreams. He didn't talk about work unless she asked. He didn't check his phone during their lunches. He was present in a way he'd never been before. On her third visit, Marcus introduced her to the Winters family. Emma and Lily became instant friends, disappearing into Lily's room to fold origami animals together. When Emma emerged an hour later, she was laughing, really laughing, in a way Marcus hadn't heard in years. Dad, she said as he was driving her back to her hotel. That little girl, Lily. She told me you saved her family. No, Marcus said firmly. She saved me first. Emma was quiet for a moment. She said you were lonely. That you needed friends. That's why you helped them. She's a wise kid. Were you? Emma asked softly. Lonely. Marcus pulled the car over, needing to look his daughter in the eyes. Yes, he admitted. I had everything I thought I wanted, and I was the loneliest person in the world. I'd forgotten that success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. That money can buy 1,000 fancy dinners, but it can't buy a single moment of genuine human connection. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I missed you, Dad. Not the dad who was always working, but the dad who used to read me stories and make pancakes on Saturday mornings. That dad, I know, sweetheart, I missed him too. I lost him somewhere along the way. Marcus wiped his own eyes. But I'm finding my way back. I can't change the past, but I'm trying to be better now. For you, for myself, for everyone I let down. That night, alone in his penthouse, Marcus held the origami crane up to the light. It was just a piece of trash, really, a candy wrapper folded by a child's hands. But it had become his most treasured possession, worth more than every stock option and real estate holding in his portfolio. Don't be sad, you matter too. 6 words that had changed his life. A year after that fateful November night, Marcus hosted a dinner at his home, not a business dinner, but a real celebration. The Winters family was there, along with Emma and his ex-wife Jennifer, who had agreed to give him another chance at friendship, if not romance. Several colleagues from the shelter attended, along with some of David's students and their families. It was chaotic and loud and imperfect. Someone spilled wine on his expensive carpet, and the soufflés he'd attempted to make deflated spectacularly. But it was also filled with laughter and warmth and the kind of genuine joy that money could never buy. As Marcus looked around his home, truly seeing the people instead of just going through social motions, Lily appeared at his side. You're not lonely anymore, she observed, slipping her small hand into his. No, Marcus agreed, squeezing gently. I'm not. Are you happy? Marcus considered the question seriously. Was he happy? His company was doing well, but he'd stepped back from daily operations to spend more time on philanthropy and personal relationships. He had less money than before, having donated enormous sums to causes that mattered. His social circle was smaller but infinitely more meaningful. His penthouse was often filled with noise and mess and the beautiful chaos of life. Yes, he said, surprised by how true it was. I'm happy. Lily beamed at him. Good. You deserve to be happy. Everyone does. She skipped away to join Emma, and Marcus found himself blinking back tears again. He'd become quite the crier over the past year, much to his own surprise. But they were good tears, tears of gratitude, of connection, of finally understanding what it meant to be truly alive. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and Marcus was cleaning up, he found something on his dining room table. Another origami crane, this one folded from shimmering gold paper. He picked it up carefully and found Emma's handwriting on the wing. Welcome home, Dad. Love you. Marcus Chen stood in his penthouse, a paper crane in each hand, one from a homeless child who'd taught him compassion, one from his own daughter who'd taught him forgiveness, and realized he'd finally found what he'd been searching for all along. Not success, not wealth, not power, but purpose, connection, love, the things that truly mattered, the things that made life worth living. And it had all started with a simple act of kindness, a chocolate soufflé shared with strangers, and a little girl who'd seen past his expensive suit to the lonely human being underneath. Marcus carefully placed both cranes on the mantel, where they caught the light from the city below. Tomorrow, he'd wake up and continue building his new life, not an empire of money and power, but a legacy of compassion and human connection. Tonight, for the first time in years, he would sleep peacefully, knowing he mattered not because of what he owned, but because of how he loved. And somewhere across the city, a little girl drifted off to sleep in her own bed, in her own room, in a warm home, clutching her tattered rabbit and dreaming of all the beautiful things that could be created from nothing but love and paper and hope.